Hello, welcome back to the studio. Today we are going to talk about the Horizon series of cameras. I made a video a couple years ago about the Horizon 202. If you haven't seen that already, you should go watch it. I'll put a link somewhere. Today we have 3 generations of Horizon. So this is the original Horizont, this is the Horizon 202, which we covered before, and this is the later generation Horizon Perfekt. I know it's very Gen Z to hold your lav mic in your hand like this, but I'm going to clip it so that I can use both my hands. We already went over this camera. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it. This was kind of my first exposure to the Horizon series, and so it's kind of my baseline. So the other two I'm basically going to compare to here. So starting with the Horizont, I gotta say this camera looks fantastic. Very like brutalist, Soviet brushed metal and this leatherette here. So great looking camera. The rest I would say is not so great. Viewfinder is offset here and also comes off. And the reason it comes off is because the rewind knob is under here. The viewfinder being offset means that you have an additional parallax. So not only are you offset in this dimension, you're also offset in this dimension. Not that the framing of these cameras is ever incredibly precise, but it just makes it a little bit worse. The other thing that is a little bit worse about the Horizont compared to the 202 and the later generations is that you only have one speed for the turret. So if you remember, the way we control exposure on the Horizon, all of the series of cameras, is we have the speed of the turret and we also have the opening of the slit. So these shutter speeds here don't actually control the speed that the turret moves, they control the opening of the slit. So you have on this camera on high speed 250, 125, and 60th of a second. On the earlier Horizont, we don't have any control of the turret speed, and the only shutter speeds available as a result are 30, 60, and 125, assuming they're even calibrated correctly, which, you know, is not a great assumption. Lenses between each of these cameras is very similar, so they are all a 28mm f2.8 maximum aperture. The earlier ones do not say multi-coated. The Horizont does not say multi-coated. Not sure if it's single-coated or if it's completely uncoated. The later 202 and Perfekt both say that they are coated lenses. That said, you're still gonna get flare if you're shooting these guys into the sun. You're still gonna see your image is gonna be washed out if you're shooting these directly into the sun, and you'll see a line when the lens sweeps into the sun. So that's just an artifact of how all of these cameras work. I would assume the uncoated or less coated lens would be worse, but it's still gonna happen even with a more modern multi-coating. This is actually the strap that came with the 202. I think I mentioned in the last video that it was nice because I unboxed it, I took it out of the package, and I said, oh, it's nice that they include a strap. I wore this strap for one day and it gave me a rash. So I was a little overzealous in that last video endorsing this strap, and I can now say that I heavily do not endorse this strap. I anti-endorse this strap. It does look nice though. Similar to the Horizont kind of whole aesthetic. It looks nice, but it's actually a little bit worse. Moving on to the Horizon Perfekt. So this is the lomography version. Lomography contracted with KMZ, the factory that makes these, and made their own version, the Perfekt, which is, I believe, essentially exactly the same as the Horizon S3 Pro. It has an additional 500th of a second maximum shutter speed. The rest of the shutter speeds and apertures are the same as the 202, and I would bet that the lens is exactly the same, minus whatever manufacturing defects rolled off the line. Other thing that they changed about this one, the plastic, obviously. This one looks kind of like it is allergic to bees and got stung. So it has this like blobby plastic look. The handle, the bottom handle is incompatible between the Perfekt and the 202. So that's just another minor annoyance. But other than that, features very similar. This one, you'll notice I have a 3D printed rewind knob on it. And the 3D printed rewind knob is because mine broke and I had to redesign one to fit on there. So this one doesn't fold, but it does work for rewinding the film. So I will say, when I made that first video, the 202 was a lot cheaper. The 202 was in the like $100 and $150 range, and then the Perfekt or S3 generation was in the $300 range. Now they've kind of all crept up to the $300 range. It could be I made that last video right before the Russia-Ukrainian war broke out. It could be that film camera prices are just going up. I don't know exactly, but now they're kind of all around the same price, and in light of that information, I would definitely go for a later model. I will get to the number one thing that I think is better about this later model, which is the sound. So if you remember, the original Horizon 202 is quite loud. So that is the normal shutter speed. The Perfekt is much quieter. So when you fire this camera in a room, everybody turns and looks at you. It's very obvious. When you fire this camera, you know, it's not quiet, it's not silent, but it is much less obtrusive. So this one's kind of a middle ground because the turret speed is in the middle of these two. So, oops, I have to wind it. It's another annoying thing about this camera. You have to wind it using the rotary knob instead of a single lever, but so kind of in the middle. It's not loud, not quiet. Honestly, it sounds pretty nice. I'll show you the slow shutter speed on the 202, which sounds like this. Quite loud. The Perfekt, again, not silent, but much quieter. So if you see both of these for the same price, I would say, you know, exposure-wise, that extra 500 shutter speed doesn't really matter, and you can actually kind of move the lever a little bit on the 202 anyway. I don't think that's an important feature. I think shutter sound is kind of the biggest feature that you get when you go to the later models. I wanted to talk about the tape mod a little bit. The mechanism of all these cameras is very similar. They each start with the film over here, run it around this film plane, and then onto the take-up spool over here. So the 202 and the Perfekt, almost exactly the same inside. And you can see in both of these cameras that I have installed copper tape. So there was originally a film plane made of metal, and I have put a piece of tape on each of these outside of the film area and then burnished it down onto the rails. And what this does is, again, this moves the focus back. Originally, these cameras are focused at infinity at f2.8. I think that's a terrible way to shoot. I don't think that, even if you're a landscape photographer, a lot of times you're gonna have like a tree that's maybe 20 feet away, and you'll wanna have that in focus. And if you have the background is perfectly sharp because you're shooting at f2.8 and then your foreground is out of focus, I don't think that's gonna make a great photo. So I think that doing this mod, which moves the film plane backwards and focuses the camera closer, makes for a much better camera, a much easier to shoot camera, because there is no other way to focus this camera. So I think doing the film plane mod, adding this tape, makes the camera much more suitable for any sort of shooting. So whether that's here in the studio or street photography or landscape photography, I think you kind of won't really go wrong by adding this tape mod. So now I'm going to show you how to do that, and I'm going to do it on the Horizont, which again is largely the same as these other two cameras. I just already have tape on these two, and I don't have it on this one, so I'm going to show you how to do it on the Horizont. I have some copper tape, an X-Acto knife, and the camera, which is open. So you can use any sort of tape that the film is going to ride smoothly on. So I've seen some people use label maker tape. I mostly have used this copper tape because this is what I have around, but you can try, you can experiment. I have tried electrical tape, which has a smooth surface, but the adhesive hasn't worked as well. So eventually the adhesive comes off and then it just kind of gums up the camera. So copper tape has worked pretty well for me. I've also used lead tape. Lead has pretty good like lubricating properties, so it lets the film slide smoothly. but it's also toxic, so copper is not toxic. We can do it using measurements, or we can do it just using our eyes, and I think that is going to be about right. So cut the tape. And one key here is that you really want to burnish the tape on really well. So that's, you want to like stick it down really hard, because if the film comes by and picks up the tape, you're going to be in trouble, and your camera mechanism is going to get gummed up. So you want to make sure that once you have the tape in position, to stick it down really hard. So there we go, and then I'll use the knife to push the end a little bit. So, yep, burnish that. Now you can see I've actually gotten it a little bit in the film plane here. So this is going to show in our images, it's going to change the shape of the image. So what I'm doing is I'm burnishing the edge down with my fingernail to conform it to the existing rail. The rail on the original Horizont is actually a little bit narrower than it is on the 202 and the Perfekt, which I'll show you right here. So these have a slightly wider rail. The function is still the same. The goal of the mod is still to do exactly the same thing, but that is just, if your camera looks slightly different than this one, that's why. There we have one side, and I will measure the other side. This is, again, pretty easy. And obviously if you have, a ton of tape, it's not a huge deal if you need to do this a couple times. I will say if your camera does get jammed, you will need to probably unload the film in a dark bag. That is a caution, that if you mess this up, if your tape becomes trapped inside the camera, then you are going to need to rescue your film somehow. So dark room, dark bag, some way to get your film out without exposing it to light. These are kind of finicky cameras. I think I've mentioned that before. They are prone to jamming, prone to breaking. I haven't had a ton of, completely unsalvageable rolls, but it's actually funny. I was trying to do a focus test a while ago, and it shredded the roll for the focus test. So that was a funny mistake, and I don't have the results of that focus test to show you as a result. So yeah, there we go. That is one tape modded Horizont. So now our focal plane will be a little bit closer. I put a calculation chart up. You can do the calculation, or you can use whatever tape you have and hope that the thickness works out for you. I will say there are diminishing returns, so if you just keep making it thicker and thicker and thicker, you don't actually get a linear decrease in the focal distance. If you put a super thick piece of tape such that your camera is completely bogged down, that's not going to help you very much. So there we are, modded, ready to shoot. I hope you enjoyed this video, because there were a lot of folks asking for that portion of the video, and I hope you enjoyed this comparison of the cameras, and I hope you do not use this strap, because it really sucks. I will see you again, and happy panoramas. All right, here we are again. Oh no. You're just like, and the other, so that's one way we control it.